Hello everyone, my name is Giulia Angheluță. I'm a fourth-year medical student at Carol Lavila University of Medicine and Pharmacy, and today I'm going to be the host of this podcast. We have here with us Vlad Coșoreanu, a key figure of SURGICON and one of the most active and dedicated members of the Romanian Society of Surgery. He is currently a second-year Paediatric Surgery resident at the Marie Curie Children's Emergency Hospital. He is past president of the Romanian Student Society of Surgery and the first president and one of the founders of SURGICON, the International Surgical Congress for Students. Well, I guess we are all curious about that, so should we start with that? How did you come up with the idea of an International Surgical Congress for Students here in Bucharest?
So the idea of an International Student Surgical Congress was floating around at that time. But you have to keep in mind that there was only one leadership which had to attend national and local matters. So adding a new huge project on the agenda was not an easy task. So for most of us, it was just a distant dream. And when me and my team started our mandate, it was already overwhelming with the things we had to do in the next 12 months. So it was on the 14th of December 2018 when we gathered for a leadership meeting in a kitchen, in the treasurer's kitchen, actually. And we discussed all kinds of matters related to national and local things, such as financial, website related, and so on. And I'd like to give a big shout out to my BEX team back then, which were Teodor Dumitraș, Treasurer, Diana Potrniche, Secretary General, Andrada Artamonov, Communications Vice President, and Andrei Crețu, Scientific Vice President, who later became the next president. So it was the first time we officially discussed the idea of an International Surgical Students Congress. And of course, we were very aware of the fact that we may have been underprepared logistically, financially, and behind the schedule as well. So we took it with a grain of salt. So we had a lot of fun discussing the new logo and the new motto and the new name for the Congress. So at that time, we were just only some dreamers in a kitchen, laying the foundation of a future, seemingly funny concept, a new Congress for students. So I always think about that moment whenever I see SURGICON reaching a new milestone, because back then we didn't have a name. We were not sure about organizing it, but we came out with the silliest motto of them all. I mean, it was inspired by L'Oreal. As I told, we had a lot of fun. The motto was, because you're worth it, pentru că meritați, in Romanian. So yeah, that was the funny little story behind SURGICON. It was just a kitchen meeting.
Okay. Well, organizing a brand new concept of a congress for students from students is nowhere near easy. So I guess that the organizing committee had to work continuously to make that a success. But being the first edition, how did you manage to make it so popular and to have so many participants sign up for the congress?
Yeah, so it was 3 days, exactly 3 days after the meeting when we had the Christmas surgical party. In 2018. So we announced the first edition. The people were very cheerful at that moment. They will later regret it 10 months from then. But yeah, people were very greeted this idea. So in the following weeks, we put on an organizing chart, some job descriptions for the SURGICON department coordinators, and so on. We had a call, and a lot of senior and junior members got involved because they were very enthusiastic and energetic. And yeah, as I said before, the idea of a surgical international congress for students was floating around in the air, mainly because we had the opportunity of hosting the 27th edition, the edition in the year 2017 for the International Association of Student Surgical Society Symposium. And it was a huge blast. I mean, everyone was shocked at how well it went. So few senior members who were involved in the RSSS symposium back then knew how much work had to be put into this kind of project, so they took on a great responsibility. And on the other hand, junior members had the great role of thinking outside the box and coming up with fresh ideas. So to answer your question, I think even though there was a lot of teamwork and a lot of effort that had to be put in this first Congress edition, I think the cornerstone of becoming so popular even from the first edition was putting together consecrated activities like workshops and debates and so on, alongside with fresh new perspectives which were offered by the junior members. So yeah, that's your answer, I think.
Well, and after it all ended, what were the first impressions after the first edition in 2019? Was it the success you have personally envisioned?
Yeah, so there was such a great deployment of forces the weeks before the Congress and during the Congress that when the Congress ended, it was like a strange dream, or let's say a nightmare that we woke up from. So it took us some days or even weeks to realize what a huge success it was. It was the closing ceremony. As you can imagine, it was very emotional, and that's when we first had the opportunity to take a step back and enjoy the Congress for ourselves. Participants and the speakers around the country and the world came to us, and they were very impressed with the work we've done and the final result. So yeah, we've also had some speakers confess to us that they had a better experience here at SURGICON than they previously had at their own professional societies.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well,
Yeah.
to describe a little that success, I think it is worth mentioning that in the first edition of SURGICON, there were approximately 500 participants, over 50 surgical workshops, and 15 international renowned speakers. We are getting closer and closer to the fourth edition of SURGICON, which is an amazing event. So where do you see SURGICON on the map of Europe and its future potential right now?
So, as a matter of fact, I think all of us are aware of the fact that the RSSS is the biggest, most dynamic, and most active student surgical society in Europe, and presumably in the world, because we didn't find any society like ours when searching for one. So we've always thought about this, and even from the beginning, and we envisioned SURGICON as the international hub for future aspiring surgeons. So yeah, that's the dream, but we are aware that for that to happen, it needs a lot of time and tradition. But that's what it's going to happen. Think about the RSSS in the beginning days when it was nothing more than a debate circle for students passionate about surgery, and then it rapidly grew into this huge organization. So yeah, it will all come naturally, but we have to play our little roles in that.
Well, talking about this amazing organization, you are a past president of the Romanian Student Society of Surgery. How was it like to be in charge of such a devoted student organization?
It was hell.
Okay.
Yeah, it was hell unleashed because not to scare anyone, but again, you have to take into account that there was only one leadership that had to attend local and national, and with the founding of SURGICON, let's say international matters. So it was a very demanding and full-time and also rewarding period of my life. It had a big impact on my personal development, from people skills to technical skills, work overload, resistance, and so on. So whenever I find myself in a stressful situation, being overloaded with work and so on, I think about that, and I think it's like a performance sport sometimes.
Would you do it again? if you had
That's a very good question. That's the question for every president or leadership member. I won't answer that.
Okay. Well, we all know that there are many engaging scientific activities organized by the Romanian Student Society of Surgery. At that time, what was your favorite?
No doubt, the answer would be microsurgery workshops, because I still remember being a participant in, and it was this. I was in my third year, just after completing basic surgical skills. I hope you still call it the same.
Yeah.
I'm very old, I know. So it was just after that, and I remember it being this high-end, exclusive, demanding and hypnotizing experience working with rats, live rats back then, and doing microvascular anastomosis, and it was just the holy grail of workshops. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to do some microvascular anastomosis again, maybe. And you have to remember that back then, before we acquired our own microscopes in 2019, we relied on the ones size provided for us to organize the workshops. So yeah, buying our own working microscopes was a huge milestone, and also a huge opportunity for SURGICON that year.
Well,
Yeah.
that sounds really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moving back to being a medical student, it can sometimes be quite exhausting. And I wanted to ask you, how did you manage to successfully be a volunteer and acing in medical school?
Yeah, so that's a trick question, because I really aced my first 3 years, but after I got religiously involved, let's say, in this society we call SSCR, my marks got lower, because I've always seen leadership positions as a great opportunity and unique opportunities, once in a lifetime opportunity to make a change and to leave something behind. So I consciously sacrifice my marks in that regard. Yeah, but I'm not. It didn't influence my future as a president. So
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
guess you had a lot to acquire from that experience as
yeah,
well.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the first year, there are two types of medical students: those who come with a lifelong dream of becoming something, and those who do not really know what they want to become and switch it back and forth all of those 6 years in college. How was it for you? Was surgery, pediatric surgery, the dream, or did you come up with this in college?
Yeah. So I've always loved the idea of practicing medicine in a very hands-on manner. So surgery is the answer for that. But I didn't always think of surgery as being my first option. So it was first in my third year, when I fell in love with pediatric surgery. But until the 6th year, when I had to choose a given specialty, I switched back and forth, as you say, and in the end, I followed my heart. So here I am, a pediatric surgery resident.
What was your second option?
I thought about many medical specialties, such as gastroenterology, cardiology, also borderline specialties such as ENT. Yeah.
And you chose pediatric
Yeah,
surgery as the
yeah,
dream. Okay. Well, you have such a noble medical specialty, pediatric surgery. So tell us more about this. What were your first impressions when you started the residency?
Apart from being a surgical specialty, you have to remember this is an emergency surgical specialty. So working in an emergency hospital, things went very rough, very, very fast. So a lot of night on calls, a lot of late working days, a lot of weekends, busy weekends. So that's still a very hard thing to cope with. I'm still coping with it, but having some great mentors, experienced and caring mentors. That's what made the difference. Yeah, but and you also have to know that maybe pediatric surgery is the widest surgical specialty there is in Romania, at least, because it brings together so many specialties such as thoracic surgery, general surgery, urology, gynecology, neonatal surgery, and so on. You think about the extremes. I mean, from neonates from 1.5 kilos to obese 17-year-old patients, and also the context of presentation. I mean, is it an acute pathology or is it a chronic pathology? Yeah.
So is it like you have imagined? Are you living the dream?
It's way harder than I imagined, but as I said before, having great mentors made a huge difference.
Well, that's great. What was the most successful experience you had up until now as a pediatric surgery resident?
So, shocking as it may seem, I don't think we can talk about personal successes as residents, but making baby steps every day and with every case, we can all get there. So it's a continuous learning curve, but for me right now, the most satisfying thing is to be able and know that I can wrap my head around the case, is it even if it's complicated or a simple case, and to be able to run all the cases provided by the emergency department, almost all of them, by myself. Um, and also, on the other hand, the most rewarding surgical experience, let's say, I've had during this past 1.5 years is when we had a patient with esophageal stenosis, which could not be dilated. So the operation was, it's called a coloesophagoplasty. Basically, you have to replace the esophagus with a colon graft, and it's a very lengthy and risky and complicated surgery. It took us 14 hours 2 months ago, I think. Yeah, it was very, very lengthy. But the feeling after some days, when the patient isn't allowed to eat anything, after some days, the doctors allow him or she, in our case, it was a little girl. We allowed her to eat something, so it was a really beautiful experience to see that child eat again after so many years. Yeah, it's
Yeah, well, I guess that is why pediatric surgery is such a noble profession, because you do something for a kid, for a child, and then he or she grows up into a healthy adult.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite rewarding.
Yeah.
Okay. There are a lot of scientific activities going on in SURGICON. The debate, for example, which happened for the first time in the first edition in 2019. Presenting scientific arguments or scientific papers can be quite challenging for a medical student. So what do you think about taking up research in the first years of a medical student?
I think taking up research is beneficial in any step of your professional development, starting from high school to being a senior doctor, because because research has a way of making you see the main question and starting from the question to look for the answers, and that's the way medicine and every science has grown over the years. So that's a very healthy way to have your thoughts and ideas in place in your mind.
Do you have research experience?
Yeah, when I was in my first year, I started research in a biophysics laboratory, and we studied the effects of various substances on the growth of a certain leukemia cell, T cell. and we presented our work in international congresses. So that's a very useful thing to do, because it plunges you right in the real world of research. And also, when I was in my third year, I think, I started research for a brief period of time at the neurosurgery department, and that's a very nice experience as well.
So you enjoyed working in a lab and doing research as well, besides being...
but it's very different from running the society and being a volunteer in the RSSS. I mean, they are completely different things, but you can learn small things from every experience.
Well, I guess you had taken part in a lot of international congresses and competition. What was the scientific paper that you are most proud of, that you presented and you are most proud of?
I think I can't recall the name of the paper right now, but I have to think about it. It was when our work with the human T-cell leukemia was published in hematology, I think. It was a very good paper.
Well, and that happened in first year?
Yeah, but you have to keep in mind that it was conducted with the help of a professor here in Carol Davila University.
Yeah, so but still, it's an original study. It's not a review or something. You did the research, and well, I think that's something worth mentioning. And going back to the Romanian Society of Surgery, how did you start there, your experience up to being the president, which is the highest position in the society?
The funny thing is, if you know Dana Pisică, she was the president of RSSS two years before me.
No, I was in first year when you were the president.
Okay. Yeah, and she's from Constanța, like I am. So on our first days of college, for me and my girlfriend here in Bucharest, we met with a friend who told us about this student surgical society. At that time, I was interested in surgery, and she told us that it's a great society. You should get involved, even though if you don't want to pursue a surgical career and so on. And I reached out to Dana and talked to her, and after that, I tried to attend a Notes and Sutures workshop, and I don't know how it's now, but back then, if you wanted to be a participant, you had to apply for, I don't know, 4 or 5 times.
It's the same. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it was horrible. So sometimes you think about not going anymore. But yeah, it's an experience in its own.
Yeah, but I think you can apply for Notes and Sutures in other cities as well. For example, I did that workshop in Constanța because I couldn't wait to be like the 4th or the 5th time applying. So yeah.
So I started from the bottom, let's say, as a participant, and I really liked the atmosphere. Not necessarily just the practical and hands-on experience, but also the people. So I think that's the standard answer that anyone attending a workshop is giving. So after that, I became an observer and then a trainer and so on. In my third year, I had the opportunity of occupying a newly vacant role as fundraising department coordinator at the society, and from then on I got
only up.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier something about a Christmas party. Well, what are other social activities that students can take part of in the Romanian Student Society of Surgery?
So, apart from the parties, which were back in my time, Halloween party and I'm not a party person.
Well, with
Okay.
the pandemic
Yeah.
and everything, we had to reduce the number of parties.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. There is also the Black Sea camp, and also the trauma camp in the mountains. Yeah, I mean,
Can you tell us more about the trauma camp? It sounds really interesting.
yeah, I was a participant when I was in my fourth year, I think. Yeah, and it's really a great experience, mostly because you go there with people you already know, and you are taken out of your comfort zone, and you learn a lot of new things, and your position in the society doesn't matter anymore. You're just a participant there. So we had a lot of fun. Yeah, you know the deal. You learn how to make a fire, how to survive in the woods. You have some BLS and ALS courses, and basically it's such a nice experience because it's out of your comfort zone.
And probably it's a bonding experience
Yeah, of
for
course.
everyone in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
apartments
Mhm.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I confess that I've never been to the trauma camp, but I actually looking forward to now
Yeah,
that
you
you
should.
present this so well.
Yeah.
I can't wait to make a fire.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, what is the hardest and the most challenging experience you have had up until now as a pediatric surgery resident? Do you have something that left a mark on you?
Yeah, we have a small number of young patients, very young patients, which who died. But I use sometimes have to get used to that, because you have to do everything that's in your power to save them. But sometimes it's just too much for them. And also, I think the day-to-day challenge being a resident is finding the right balance between thinking for your own, becoming your own doctor, let's say, and thinking all the time what your mentors would want you to do, and making them proud if that's a thing, and also finding a work-life balance, which is sometimes a very big challenge. Yeah, sometimes it's very hard, and sometimes it's impossible.
But what's your state right now? How do you balance those two things, the being a surgeon and your personal life?
So up until now, I've learned to get used to late work days, not being sure of any weekend that I am free to go somewhere in a vacation. Um, Whenever you go to the hospital, you have to keep in mind that you may go at 8 a.m. or 8:30, but you never know when you are able to leave. And even if you are going to the changing room to leave the hospital, sometimes you are called to come back. And I also moved. Me and my wife moved 5 minutes from the hospital to be there in case anything happens.
Well, did you get late night calls like
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
movies, like at 2 a.m. They
Yeah.
call you, we have an emergency,
Yeah.
you have to go to the hospital?
Yeah, it happened a few times. I can recall 2 times when we had to go into surgery. Yeah, that's an emergency surgery, because everybody thinks appendicitis is a major emergency, but it's not. There are certain types of situations when you need to go to the OR right away. So yeah, even if it's 2 a.m. or 3 a.m.
Yeah, well, I guess
Yeah.
that's exciting too.
Yeah.
It's a very exciting part of being a surgeon.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, yeah, it's really exciting for a young surgeon, but I think when you are 40 years old or 50 or 60, like my oldest mentor is, it grows to be, I mean, very hard.
Yeah, well, you've talked a lot about mentors, and it's clearly that you appreciate your mentors. How do we find those kind of people to mentor us?
Okay, so the first thing to do is to be sure you would like to pursue a certain surgical or medical specialty. After that, you have to talk to your older colleagues and find little snippets of information and put them all together, make the best decision, because not always, if you go to 10 pediatric surgery residents and ask them what mentors you should have, you'll most probably get 3 or 4 answers, which are very different, even in the same hospital. So you have to use your intuition sometimes and your transfer of confidence, let's say, in a person.
Yeah, well, I guess that worked out pretty well for you,
Yeah.
considering the fact that
Yeah.
you admire them so much and you put all your
Yeah.
trust into your
Yeah,
mentors. Well,
I've
great.
actually it's a nice story because Maria Pușcașu, who was the president before me, she is also pediatric surgery resident, and she was my mentor in these college years. So I asked her, "What should I do?" And she gave me some good advice. Yeah.
Well, have you ever considered leaving the country? Why did you choose to stay in Romania and do the residency here? Has
First,
the thought crossed your
yeah.
mind to go away?
Yeah, it has. Not definitively. I mean, I cannot be sure it would be a better choice, but I would like to go some, let's say, 6 or 12 months to study abroad. But I think the most important thing when you go abroad is to already have a base, because you cannot go hunting for I don't know, hard animal to catch if you cannot understand the basis of your specialty. Even though you've read 10 books, that's not enough. You have to practice it at least a number of years. And myself, I don't feel very prepared to go out abroad and study, let's say, a very particular way of doing things, or a very particular type of surgery, or subspecialty, because you have to get your head around the specialty in a bigger way before you ask someone else to teach you, because you have your mentors here, and until you've exhausted them with questions and cases and different situations, you cannot go and search for other answers until you don't have.
But don't you think we can find mentors in another country, for
Yeah,
example?
I think we can. Yeah, but imagine if it's not the same thing as Romanian finding a Romanian mentor. That's my opinion. As a young resident going abroad and finding a random doctor, which in his view you are another random young resident, he may be very nice, but it's not the same kind of bond. Even if it would be nicer because you only stay together 6 or 12 months and you get to get along very well, in comparison with your mentors, which will have all the reasons to make you a better surgeon, let's say. Yeah, that's my opinion. I mean, I would go abroad if only if I would be, let's say, a fourth year resident.
Well,
And talking about going abroad, Maria Pușcașu just left for France a few weeks ago. Yeah, and it's a scary experience.
yeah, but at the end, I think it's quite worth it.
Yeah.
Well, being a person who has this profession, can you tell us what is a Romanian's place in pediatric surgery on the map of the world?
I think for the moment again, that's my opinion, and I'm very new to this field, to this specialty, but I find it extremely wide. And in some countries, it started to split, like it had some years ago, because a few years ago, pediatric surgery was pediatric surgery and also general pediatric surgery, and now they are split. So maybe in the following years, we'll have to adjust to the European and the international norms and maybe go into more divided fields.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because it's very challenging to learn
To do them all.
To do them all.
Thank you very much, Vlad, for your attendance tonight and for all the information you have given to us. And thank you all for watching. And we are waiting for you at the 4th edition of SURGICON in autumn. Thank you very much.